And I have a really cool story that happened to me yesterday. My little daughter, Libby, we were sitting having lunch, and she had picked up a picture that was on our table of Jesus. And he had a crown of thorns, and he was looking down, and he obviously looked very hurt. And looking at this started to make her cry because he just looked so much in pain. And she was saying, why would anybody hurt Jesus? And why would anybody hurt him? Why would he hurt him? Because he's so nice. And he's a king. And why would anybody do this? And we began to talk about just choices and things that led up to Jesus' death, but how Jesus allowed it as an opportunity to forgive our sins and offer us hope. And my little daughter over lunch said, I want Jesus to lead me and to forgive my sin and to give me a new heart. And we prayed, and she was just so excited to have a little of understanding, from this picture and this conversation we had. And it was a really neat moment to see my daughter sitting over lunch saying, I want to follow Jesus. And afterwards she said, I don't hear him in my heart. And she's looking at me like, what's the deal? And I want to encourage you, because maybe some of you feel that way. Like, I don't hear him in my heart. And my son had some real quick wisdom. He's 7, but he's just got one of those hearts. And he said, you will hear him. It's okay, you'll hear him. But you'll also feel his power. When you need to do what is right, when you need to make a choice and do what's right, you'll feel his power. And she was like, okay. And I thought it was so cool that this little 7-year-old guy was schooling her on trusting God's power for her life. It was an awesome time. So I just had to share that. That was my Easter weekend. It made a really fun weekend. So happy Easter. He is risen. All right. Now, there's lots of different traditions that people have for Easter. And one of them would be that traditional response to He is risen. Also, in the Greek Orthodox Church, there is a tradition that the day after Easter is devoted to telling jokes. Has anyone ever heard this? That actually in the Greek Orthodox Church, the day after Easter, their tradition is to tell jokes. And here's why. They felt they were imitating the cosmic joke that God pulled on Satan in the resurrection. Satan thought he had won and was smug in his victory, smiling to himself, having the last word. So he thought. And then God raised Jesus from the dead, and life and salvation became the last word. So in tradition, they tell a joke. So actually, I have a little joke for you, because I thought you might need something to tell tomorrow, and there's nothing worse than wanting to tell a joke and not having one, because it makes you reach for like knock-knock jokes. And then you feel really lousy. So here's a good one. There's this guy who goes into a restaurant, and he's reading over the menu, and then he tells the waiter how hungry he is, but how little cash he has. And he says, if I show you something amazing, though, can I have a free meal? And the waiter's kind of, a skeptic, but he agrees. So the guy reaches into his coat pocket and he pulls out a hamster. He then puts the hamster on the table along with a little piano. And the hamster sits down, cracks his knuckles, and starts playing Rachmaninoff. And the hamster's really good. So the waiter says, that's incredible. You know what? I've never seen anything like that. Okay. You can have a meal. So he's eating dinner, and he's finishing up, and he wants dessert. So he kind of presses his luck and asks for dessert, and he says, only if you can top that last act. So the guy reaches into his coat and pulls out a frog. And he puts the frog on the table, and the frog starts to sing. He has an amazing voice and great pitch. The hamster's playing the piano, and he's just singing right along. And a really fine singer. So a guy on the table next to him sees this and runs over and says, I just love frogs. I've got to have that frog. I've got $300 on me. And the guy says, no problem. You can have the frog. And he sells it to him. So the waiter brings him dessert and says, you're a fool. How could you sell a singing frog for $300? Are you some kind of nut? It must have been worth millions. And he says, I'm not crazy. The hamster's just also a great ventriloquist. So there's your joke. And it was worth laughing. It was good. But the truth is that it is a cool thing what Jesus did, and God's power in Sunday, bringing Jesus to life and bringing victory over the grave and victory over our past and victory for new life onwards. So the truth is that Sunday changes everything. There's a German theologian named Jürgen Moltmann, and he expressed in this single sentence the great span from Good Friday to Easter. Here's what he said. God weeps with us so that one day we may laugh with him. And that was his definition of all that Jesus went through on the cross from Friday to Sunday. God weeps with us so that one day we may laugh with him. It goes from a hopeless story to the victory of the ages. And by taking on his back the sin of the world, Jesus invites us to trade his sacrifice for our freedom, to be free from the eternal penalty of sin. And that's something to cheer about. That's something to be excited about. Now, earlier, one of the gals read Matthew 28, verses 1 through 7. And I just want to look at a few moments in that. It says, after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. And in another version, in Luke 24, it clarifies that they were actually bringing spices for his body, which means that they thought it was all over. They weren't going saying, here comes the resurrection. They were going in a sad state of mind. They were going brokenhearted, ready to kind of prepare him for a permanent burial. They were bringing spices. They had Jesus pegged in this place that was death. That's where they thought he would remain. And it says that there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. Now let me just ask you really quick, do angels need to sit, you think? I mean, we're talking about eternal creatures with power enough to roll a stone, but it says that he rolls a stone and he sits on it. And I don't know if maybe angels have humor and he's like, you know what, this is going to be recorded in the Gospels, and I'm not only going to throw the stone out of the way, I'm going to kick back on it. Because that's what it says he did. And for a long time I missed that, but he rolls the stone back and he sits on the stone, which I believe is also a picture that God's power is so great, he can move the things that would hold us back from God and just sit right on them and say, this stone was nothing. It's rolled away. And so the stone was rolled away, and his appearance was like lightning. His clothes were white as snow. The guards are so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. And I don't know if that means they fainted or they said, we've got to go possum. Because it says they became like dead men. Like, I imagine they're like, quick, pretend you're dead. And they just all fell down. Then the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, he is risen, just as he said. Now in Luke 24:5, Luke records this question in the conversation. The angel says, why do you look for the living among the dead? Saying, you're looking in the wrong place, ladies. You're looking in the wrong place. He's not here, he's risen. And then he adds to that, go and tell somebody. There, go quickly and tell his disciples. And that's an encouragement for us, for all those that trust in Christ, to know that there's these dead old places of life that we know that there's no life in. Just like that tomb. See, they went back to this tomb, and that's like going to any old part of life. It's like going to things in this world that don't satisfy. They're just dead. And why would we look for the living in the place of the dead? It's just all dead things. But the angel said, no, Jesus has risen. You're in the wrong spot. You're in the graveyard, and you need to be out on the street telling somebody. And that he's alive and well. And I believe that Jesus is not only alive and well, but wants to be alive and well in us. Because Jesus called himself this. In John 14, he said, I am the way and the truth and the life. So if you think about Sunday being the beginning of a journey for many of us, that moment on Sunday was not the end of the story for us. It was the beginning. And why I emphasize that is it's not a piece of artwork that we come and admire. What happened on Sunday, we don't come and say, that's beautiful, I appreciate that, and then walk on. It's a moment where we see this is the beginning of the path, and Jesus said he was the way. In fact, so much was Jesus known as the way that early Christians were not called Christians. They were called followers of the way. Because they lived this new life. Most of them lived it to the death. And I'm going to play a fun Easter video here. And what this video is it's fun and it's kind of campy and I just enjoy it. But it's got a special moment in it because what we're going to see is an Easter egg hunt. How many of you got to do any Easter egg hunting this weekend or plan on it today? Any fun hunts? Okay, some hunts in the way. We'll be looking for eggs. And we'll be discovering some eggs. And this Easter egg hunt, this is just a fun video called the Jesus Egg. But I hope you see the special meaning that it's not just about finding Jesus, but it's walking as Jesus did. So you'll enjoy it.
It was the first ever Run for the Yolks Easter egg hunt. Brainchild of Arnold and Maureen Van Tiller. I was 12 years old. If I had to be there, I figured, I might as well win. Competition looked weak. Some little kids, some kids who could barely see. David Johnson, the only kid who stood between me and ultimate victory.